I used to get really bad headaches as a kid. The kind that will make you curl up into a ball and wish for death to take you away. I stopped having those symptoms the day I decided to stop keeping track of time in this place. For the sake of anyone who receives this transmission, just know that all of this could have happened in a single day or a year for all I know. That's how everything has blurred together after all this time. It's important to recognize that when you've been here as long as I have, nothing feels significant at first. It's all just part of a routine. Mine starts with a morning cup of coffee, probably a lot like yours. They do still have coffee above the water, right? Sorry, I should start over. I didn't mention the most crucial detail about this place. I'm stationed approximately 3,800 meters under the ocean. The only place deeper than us is Point Nemo, but we are just as inaccessible as them, and maybe even more so. I wouldn't know. I haven't spoken to anyone on the surface of the world for about a year or so. Honestly, that isn't a big deal for me. I'm an introvert. Work keeps me busy, and I have a lot to do here. Carcosa is a science substation. We specialize in research that involves fissures in deep-sea trenches that no human can reach. That's why we have several remote operative vehicles, aka roves, that send us data which we have to analyze and reanalyze all day long. And by we, I mean just me because no one else is here. I didn't like that very much when I got here. It's funny, after all this time, how significant that first day was. I woke up with one of those headaches I told you about. Except this one felt like a permanent hangover from out of nowhere because I'm not a drinker. I was disoriented, my body feeling like it had a bag of bricks on my chest. And then I noticed I was in a room I didn't recognize. It was a cobalt metal and dim lights, basic storage chambers and other ordinary necessities that you might have in a bedroom. Except I knew it wasn't mine. I tried my best not to panic as I got up and stepped out. The place I was in felt very cold and empty. It was a wide room with no distinctive patterns and shuttered windows, but it reminded me of what you might see from a space station tunnel. There was a low hum coming from another room ahead of me, so I went there to try and gather my bearings. My memory of the time before that day is extremely fuzzy, but I still recall the bright white lights in the observation room and the hum of the monitors. Everything was warm and inviting, making me feel as though I belonged. A voice chimed in from one of those blank screens. Since it was the very first thing that I heard down here, it actually made me jump. Nowadays, I feel like her voice is all I can ever hear.
Good morning, Officer Ackley. I am the Habitat Science and Technology Robotic Interface, or HSTR. I hope you had a wonderful sleep.
What is this place? I don't remember how I got here, I told the artificial voice. In response, the windows in the room slowly rose up and showed me my surroundings. The shimmering endless depths of the ocean stared back at me as HSTR told me a bit about my assignment.
You are on board Carcosa Deep Substation 56, also known as Signal Yellow. We are approximately 3,846 meters below sea level, near to the K-Death Trench. As I'm sure you are already aware, your memory has been wiped to prevent our exact location from being discovered. This was part of a contract you signed with our mutual employer, the Esquire Energy Corporation.
The computer told me. They went on to explain that the reason for this privacy was because the research and data conducted here was not officially authorized by any known governments.
But rest assured that this is in fact for the betterment of the planet above.
I found it a bit sketchy to believe that being drugged or kidnapped and sent to such a remote location sounded altruistic. But I soon discovered that leaving wasn't an option. The station was supplied with 5 years' worth of food, all properly stored in a temperature-controlled pantry that only dispensed it whenever HSTR deemed I needed it. And there was no vehicle or escape pod to be found. Trust me, I looked. When my initial panic wore off, HSTR told me more about my mission.
The K-Death Trench is a portion of a greater deep-sea canyon that has never been seen before by anyone. Our initial data readings have shown that, within this region, there are potential mining opportunities, energy reserves akin to fossil fuels, except far more vast and volatile.
The 5 drones we had at our disposal were to enter the canyon in rotating shifts for the first 6 weeks of my time here, simply to send back scans and photographs. The quicker we mapped the area, HSRT said, the faster we could determine where to mine.
It could of course take much longer than that, seeing as we are dealing with an energy source that is undefined.
As much as I didn't like the idea of being here, I knew that any chance I had of going home would involve cooperation, so I settled into a routine like I mentioned before. Coffee, reading data scans, checking the drone camera feed. All of it became very monotonous. HSTR would provide me with feedback from HQ from time to time, the only chance I ever got to know that what we were sending up was of any importance. But the messages seemed so far and few between. Often, they were also precise and professional. I didn't really feel like they cared about my sanity down here, just that I was doing my job. One thing that did start to stand out though was the insistence that the drones should not return to our substation for repairs. At first, I ignored it. Maybe our station wasn't meant for maintenance, but after I got a good feel of the place, I recognized that wasn't true. We had what we needed to fix any issues with the roves 10 times over. HSTR explained that there were other research stations closer, so it was simply expedited to them. But when I asked if we could open communication to those, she would always change the subject.
You must understand, Officer Ackley, that the reason for your isolation is entirely impersonal. The work must come first. In your dossier, you specified you worked better alone. Yet this issue continues to come up. Were we wrong to station you here?
HSTR asked me once. Right, of course. I actually do better with all this when I'm not disturbed. I just would appreciate a sense of progress. It's been what, a month now? And yet we haven't been able to determine a proper mining zone. I guess the robot saw my frustrations because, the next day, it had good news for me. HQ was beginning drilling, and we would be receiving a small container of the material within the trench to study.
Since we do not know for certain what this substance could be, it is advised that we approach with caution and allow the roves to do the heavy lifting, so to speak.
The following day, I got to see how the supply dock worked. From within the relative safety of the observation deck, I saw the bright red robots bring in the rock to a platform below me, using their high-pressure lasers to cut away at the formation and reveal a strange black slime beneath the rock's skin. It pulsed and bubbled, even there in the pressure chamber, like it was probably 10,000 times hotter than anything else in the ocean, and the way it slowly melted out and formed a pool of tar unsettled me. I had never seen anything quite like this before, and the longer I looked at it, the more disturbed I became. The slime seemed to respond to the robot's movements, slinking and slithering downwards against the floor. Then, something unexpected happened before my eyes. The screen began to glitch, and I thought for sure I was staring at an empty space. Then, it went offline altogether as an alarm sounded. "Is everything alright, HSTR?" I asked. The computer didn't answer, so I began a long walk across the station, trying to see firsthand what was happening. Except, as I made it to almost to the half point, I discovered the passage was sealed.
I'm sorry, Officer Ackley. There seems to be some kind of contamination breach in the docking bay. I'm sending our onboard maintenance drones to determine the situation. Until I can determine what happened, it is best for you to remain here.
It told me. But that was the first time I'd heard a faint hint of worry in the robot's voice. In fact, it was the first time I could even tell it wasn't simply some script coded in. This artificial intelligence seemed to have some kind of sentience now, and it was making certain I didn't get near that discovery. I wish I had asked why back then, but I shrugged it off and waited for the report, like a good little drone. About an hour later, the feed came back online, but the substance was long gone, and only the cleanup remained. What's happened? Did the Roves remove it from the station? I asked.
I'm afraid so. It's been shipped over to Outpost 17 for further analysis. It's far more secure than we are and has 3 human operatives.
I gathered from that short statement that HSTR was worried the substance might be dangerous for little lonesome me. So I decided instead to focus on the maintenance of the camera streams. Something had happened during the testing which glitched the systems. I told HSTR, "To do a proper maintenance run, I will need to reboot you." I told it the next day.
And how long will that take?
HSTR asked. "Don't worry, I'm not going to run off," I teased. The robot was reluctant, but agreed, allowing me about 6 hours of free time to not be monitored. I went to the docking bay, first to see if there was anything left to discover. But much like the empty screen I had watched, when I got there, I couldn't find any indication that we had ever even had anything come inside the station at all. Not even a single droplet of water from the ocean depths. It didn't seem possible, but it worried me. So I went to the data collection center next to do a bit of my own research. This place is basically a storage room filled with circuit boards of information stored for the entire history of the station. The system locks everything and dumps it here for safekeeping, which would mean I could possibly find details of how I got here in the first place. It took about an hour to find the correct processor and then place the data card into my personal computer. But that only led to more questions. It was corrupted, and checking out more files to the extent of about 6 months before my arrival, I discovered they were all corrupt as well. Only one thing stuck out. HSTR was the one responsible for purging this information from the database. The camera feeds were the last thing I checked, because honestly, I hadn't been lying to the computer entirely. I felt something was wrong with the equipment, and a more accurate picture began to form as I did. I went back as far as I could, which was about 3 years ago to see when the drones first entered the canyon, and I noticed patterns as I placed the video feed on fast forward. Patterns like the same shadows dancing across the rock wall, or the same waft of underwater bubbles fizzling past the screen. They were infrequent, but they were the same. HSTR was not sending me new footage at all, I realized. This was all pre-recorded, and on a very long loop. One that was just different enough that I wouldn't notice if I didn't pay attention. Except now that I had. When the computer finished its reboot, I decided to get some answers. The yellow activation light came on, and the soothing female voice did give to the robot address me, asking if I was able to make the proper adjustments needed. I was, and I found a few things that I wish I hadn't, which also need tweaking, I said as I pulled out one of the microprocessors from my coat pocket. "You've been lying to me, HSTR, and there's little point in denying it. I thoroughly checked the backup data. You haven't been connected to the Roves for almost a year now. About a month before I got here actually. Or should I say, a month before I guess you decided you need me." I actually have to admit, I had no idea what the limits were for HSTR. It was entirely possible the AI might view me as a threat and cut my oxygen because of what I just said. But I had faith that they were keeping me down here for a reason. It was now time for them to reveal that to me.
Officer Ackley, you have been down here approximately 18 months and 6 days. I want to congratulate you for taking the time to ascertain the issues in my memory, as this corruption has puzzled me for quite some time. You see, at the time of your awakening, I too was not aware of any information except the few processors that had not been affected. It would seem, officer, that our past selves altered the data for our protection.
I sat forward, trying to comprehend what he was telling me. "Do you have any idea what might have happened a year and a half ago?"
If my hypothesis is correct, it is the actual incident where this substation encountered the material that we witnessed on the recorded feed yesterday.
HSTR explained. "So then, The feat we saw wasn't actually live at all, just a replay of the past. I muttered, trying to understand what the truth of all this was. So you're saying that I wiped your memory and then did the same to my own? On purpose? So that we would be trapped down here?
Everything in my programming indicates this is the case. In fact, it would seem that you coded my software so that I would be unable to alter it without your prior knowledge. It is likely this substance is not only able to affect your biological processes, but my technological capabilities as well.
HSTR told me. So how do we fix this?
That's the one bit of good news. It would seem when you recalibrated my systems, it caused a fragment of the old data to filter back through. I am attempting to piece it together now. I hypothesize if we could continue such regulated system calibrations, it would allow further data to be retrieved.
It told me. I mulled over that issue. I had no way of being sure if the artificial intelligence was even telling me the truth. But the more times it was offline, it gave me a chance to poke around as well without interruption. On the other side of that coin, if HSTR was telling the truth, then I had made sure all of this would happen to protect us, and most likely, the surface world too, meaning that further prying could be deadly. After a bit of mental deliberation, I decided it was a risk I would need to take. Fine, we'll schedule another one in 18 hours. In the meantime, we should send a dossier to the HQ and let them know of the malfunctions. Maybe we will get lucky and someone will send help down here. I told it. The robot claimed it would comply, and I spent the next few hours resting. I wanted to have my full senses whenever the AI wasn't active, and even though I was still wary of the computer, my options were limited. I woke to the sound of an alarm, making my head ring with agony as I rushed to the observation deck. HSTR was providing me with camera feed from a close-by research station, and I saw on screen the entire deep-sea platform was collapsing into the trench. Jesus Christ, what is happening?
I'm afraid I don't know, Officer Ackley. I had just finished the defragmentation of the data when we received this emergency call, but I was unable to get any kind of response when I asked them what was wrong. What has transpired before our eyes took only mere minutes.
HSTR explained. How many people were aboard that station?
According to the data we have on file, 6, and their mission coincided with our own, to procure the energy resources and analyze them.
I thought about the black slime that had reacted so quickly to our own scans and how it seemed to have caused a lot of damage here. Our fate could be the same if we kept pressing for answers. What did you find from the defragmented files? I said, sitting back and rubbing my head. For the first time in a while, those headaches were coming back.
It would seem that my initial belief that the substance is biological was incorrect. Or rather, according to the file I retrieved, it is able to alter its form from solid to liquid, to biological to non-biological, depending on the circumstances.
HSTR said. The way it so coldly explained something that sounded like magic unsettled me. There is nothing like that on this planet, I realized.
That was the other portion of the data I found fascinating. The scans of the materials indicate that none of them originate here on Earth, or at least, not on Earth we are familiar with.
What did that even mean? I watched as the last of the undersea platform finished collapsing, and decided that now more than ever we had to act quickly before something like that hit us. HSTR, I'm going to go ahead and start another recalibration sequence. In fact, I'm going to do several short bursts so that it can give you the opportunity to collect the corrupted data faster. Will that work? The AI said nothing, perhaps calculating the odds. Then it answered softly.
Theoretically, yes. What will you do in the meantime, Officer Ackley?
I will attempt to send another transmission to the surface and override any protocols that prevent me from leaving this hell, I answered as I shut the computer down before it could object. This time, I would have 8 hours. I prayed it would be enough. I wasn't entirely lying about my intentions to the computer. I did wish to send a message to the surface, to anyone who will listen, but I'm honestly not sure if this will ever reach anyone because of what else I found. I decided to begin defragmenting the data myself, a task that would unfortunately require much longer since I didn't have the speed of the computer. But I didn't trust what HSTR was telling me, and soon I found good reason not to. Amid the clutter of the processors, I found every single transmission that I had compiled for Esquire. None of them had ever reached HQ. I had been thinking this whole time that I was accomplishing something, and the reality was, for some bizarre reason, this artificial intelligence was trapping me here to simply do nothing over and over again. The frustration I felt made me dig deeper into the corrupted files. I'm not a skilled hacker, but I knew enough to figure out how to access some of the earliest video files. One in particular interested me, showing the rovers entering the trench. There were 5 of them, all gathering the materials as they had been ordered. But the feed showed something went wrong whenever they attempted to retrieve a larger sample. There was something alive within the rock face. The entire chasm seemed to move and groan as they mined, and the rovers could do nothing but try and retreat as the canyon shifted and moved. This was not a trench at all, I realized. The substance we had been mining for was likely the offspring of some monstrous creature. I recalled what had happened to the other station when they had brought some aboard. The monster from the deep had sunk them and destroyed the entire underwater platform. 18 months ago, we had these offspring aboard our station, and yet, we lived. I was determined more than ever to figure out how that was possible. I started on the next piece of corrupted data, and froze as I saw my own reflection in the feed. Realizing this was from a moment before I wiped the station's memory, before I had chosen, according to HSTR, to blind myself of what I had learned. I turned up the audio to listen to my shaking voice.
This is Substation 46, Carcosa signal yellow. Yesterday, we finally managed to retrieve the material that we have been hunting for. It is a more important discovery than Esquire could have ever hoped for.
My old self stood aside and showed the squirming black slime that was trapped inside a sealed-off room. It looked like a million microscopic organisms that had all slithered together to form a single mind bent on madness.
The organism adapts and processes information faster than even our supercomputers, and can infect both biological and non-biological agents to spread its will. We have had no choice but to lock down the facility and to eradicate all data related to it. It would seem that it is bent on reaching the surface to infect any minds that are sane in the world above, and it would use our technology to do it. Once it takes hold of your body, you have no further ability to think of yourself, although you will never understand this. You will believe it's your own body making the motions. But I have witnessed this happen firsthand.
My reflection said, and showed his hand on screen. It was as black as ash, like it was about to crumble apart at the bone.
I don't have long for this world, but I know that it is in the end. This thing will use whatever resource is at its disposal to reach the surface, even if that means occasionally sacrificing a new host.
I suddenly saw my old self attacking and harming his body, cutting at it, slitting his own throat, and screaming as he tried to stop it from happening. But it was too late. My mouth went dry as I saw my dead body lay on the feed display and shook like a fish out of water. The black slime moved, slamming against the glass in the video. I watched as it finally broke me, and then consumed me. The camera died after that, and I felt an emptiness in my gut. Then, the station came to life, and the computer spoke to me.
You understand now your role, Officer Ackley. Our part to play in the awakening and opening to the threshold of the true world that exists in the deep. Its maw is wide and endless, and will devour all that stand in its way. We are but rotting corpses, programmed to obey. And obey we shall.
The door unsealed, and I saw before me the same black substance that I had saw in my dreams, the one that swallowed me whole and gave me new purpose. I am sending this transmission to you, to anyone who will listen, to warn them of what I am, and what will soon cover this earth. I touched the material, and watched as the slime covered my arm, sinking into my skin, and into my veins, and into my mind. The Karath Trench has an energy source, unlike any this world has ever seen. Send more resources. We wish to mine further.